Welcome back, folks. Over the past few weeks I was playing of Ash and Steel, a new open world Gothic-like RPG. To be honest, I was following development of this for quite some time when I saw that the studio behind it wanted to try and recreate an old school RPG that doesn't rely on everything, guiding players' hand and telling you where to go, but rather you reading, listening to what NPCs say, to what quest logs say, as well as exploring each nook and cranny is very much recommended. Of Ash and Steel released a while back on 24th of November, developed by Fire and Frost and published by Tiny Build. So is it good? Well, depends, Of Ash and Steel is not a game I can just recommend like that because of the bugs and glitches I encountered, but it's also a game I somewhat enjoyed and honestly had fun in. Of Ash and Steel follows Tristan as you go on a journey to aid the mission of the Order as a cartographer basically charting the path. No spoilers, but the setup for the story was somewhat interesting, and as a Gothic-like, you can expect it to have twists and turns alongside its path. Having an ability to join the faction, basically to progress yourself as a character, and the story itself, so it's very similar in that way of how Piranha Bytes was sort of envisioning RPGs when they were making them. Tristan is a cartographer, so as is tradition, you don't know how to fight. Actually don't know how to do anything. That means learning how to wield a blade and both using one-handed weapons or two-handed weapons, as well as various other abilities like crafting, cooking, potion making, gem cutting. There is a lot here content-wise. And all of these skills rely on certain attributes, so your strength, dexterity, stamina, insight, and fortitude. Leveling them up will provide different buffs like higher damage, using better weapons, and even lifting heavy objects as you use different objects to basically unlock secret areas that might have some good loot. So you're going to take a barrel, place it somewhere, you're going to climb that barrel, and then find your way around. I mean, a game will provide clues here and there depending on what it is, but you have to actually look. You start off in a strange land, one that you don't know, so no map at the beginning at all. Even though Tristan is not sketching the map right away as a cartographer, I found that a bit weird, but you do unlock it later on where you can visit vantage spots, then Tristan will draw it out and you will be, exploring that area, and eventually you will have that map, which is again okay for me for the game formula perspective, but this can be very tricky as the map is relatively big and you can get lost easily into a territory which has high level monsters, so at least I noticed that way much more than, for example, other games which do the similar thing, which rely on you reading and looking at stuff. This game can have some problems with it because some things can be a little bit more confusing on that front. As you navigate your way around the place, there will be a bunch of side activities and quests to get to know the area, as well as sort of work as a tutorial for some stuff, like for example finding hidden treasure by digging the ground, stealing stuff, and some other mechanics I don't want to spoil if you didn't play the game. The main story itself also is very interesting. I enjoyed it. Maybe has a bit of a slow start and it relies on side activities to sort of be those quests as you navigate to the next place where the main one takes place, but later on it picks up quite a lot. Decisions do matter, which I liked, as if we're talking about old school RPGs, especially Gothic ones, like where you join, like what you decide to do, and how you approach in each and every single quest. The missions and the way you do them are relatively, free to your interpretation, and a lot of them have different ways of handling them, but some, or well, majority of them are going to be relatively straightforward. The reason I keep mentioning Gothic a lot is because, well, even in the emails I got about this game, it was sort of highlighted a lot. Because of it, I also try to see if they did what they set out to do. Besides that, you can even purchase a house that can be upgraded to have all of the amenities you want. Pretty cool to have it, and you can even get it relatively early on. So the game does think about a lot of things, and they try to encompass all of those things to make you live in this world. I think that's sort of an idea the studio had behind it, to make it so immersive that you can actually feel like a part of it and sort of progress your way in it. One aspect of the game I enjoyed a lot are graphic designs, level and environmental design as well. The map is packed with content, there is variety there and enemies to fight. I didn't feel like I saw a lot of wasted space, as everywhere I looked there was something interesting to see or loot, and there is definitely, you have to go and explore everything. They really thought about a lot when it comes to that. Also, changes in the day and night are visible, as well as the changing of what sort of, monsters you're gonna be fighting out at night, because some monsters and some things do happen during the night, and some are going to be even quest related. It doesn't tell you right away, but you will figure it out. On the immersion side, look, they did a really nice job, not just in the level itself, but the variety of, as I said, designs. Monsters that feel good and dangerous. Now, at the same time, I noticed that bigger monsters can be a bit tricky to fight, as sort of like the camera itself, and I'm going to talk about combat later, the camera itself goes in a weird way where you cannot really and properly see like those bigger monsters. I'm talking about some really huge like monsters which you're gonna be fighting. Those things a little bit problematic. The other ones were okay. They also do have a big town in the game called Greyshaft. Now, as a town, as a big town, it was believable. Layout feels natural, and just in the general design wise, I think they did a very nice job on the visual side and just packing it with different sort of content, because, well, you're gonna be returning to it. Music and sound design were okay, nothing that really stands out. I think on the music side it's a lot better. But hearing some monsters lurking in the background, especially at the beginning where you have to choose your fights and where you go and listen as you navigate, can be nerve-wracking. It accompanies the visual side well for that added immersion, so it's doing its purpose. Characters you meet along the way were okay, some more interesting than others. In general, I felt like the Order faction was somewhat while the free men, or well, the free hunters, had a lot more interesting characters, and their goals and motivations felt more believable, at least for me. So your decision is going to be split, like who you're gonna be joining, either the Order, the free men, how you're gonna be navigating that, and what sort of character you want to be, but both were okay. I just found the free men a lot more interesting to kinda go into. Crafting and gathering is a huge part of the game. As you learn more about hunting, you will gather more resources from animals that you can later use to craft gear, primarily weapons, some armor as well. But a lot of the armor you can get from factions, that's sort of its shtick, and it's sort of similar to that Gothic-like, formula. An interesting thing is though that they thought about like you as a character. So if you're not gonna be like using the stuff you find when you hunt to create something for yourself, you can always sell all of that stuff to different people. Like they're specifically gonna be searching for those parts. So it's, you have a bunch of ways of making money, not just in one way, and it will sort of like accompany what character you're gonna be playing, especially with what sort of weapons you're gonna be playing on. Cooking will be necessary, as you will need to eat and drink. Those are similar to survival games, but not annoying to the point where you constantly have to drink or constantly have to eat. Taking care of your character is somewhat necessary in this game. Same for potions, as you will need them for buffs against some fights, because some fights are not going to be easy, and when you are in the combat stance, like you can use potions, but you cannot really go and eat all that much because the game is not going to allow you that to kind of keep that momentum going. But don't worry, like when it comes to the save system, it's, classic in that sense. You can quick save and quick load whenever you want. And so we arrived at combat, which was, well, okay. It's very tactical in its sense, as you have to survive incoming attacks, which can be very deadly. Without armor at the start, you are sort of an easy prey. As you progress and learn new skills, you are faster and conserve less stamina, which allows you for a counter-strike, parry, dodge around the enemy, and that's something you will have to do because, if you don't watch their moves, like they're just going to stun lock you, which was sort of a problem within the combat itself, but a good parry can really help, so use it wisely. And here is where that problem comes. Enemy attacks are somewhat easy to cheese once you get used to it, and from time to time they can be a little bit tricky to kind of defend against, and especially if you're fighting against more enemies, I noticed they don't even pause. Like if they stun lock you into a certain area, you're just going to die. There's nothing you can do. So even each like combat encounter you have to approach very slowly. There is depth, as enemies have shields, you have to play around and sort of counterattack them, and they actually are going to do a lot of damage and avoid your attacks and also use abilities they have, so they're not easy to fight. Stamina system was also not that enjoyable. Yes, you can put points into it. Yes, Some perks which you unlock later on will give you more stamina, sure, but I still noticed that sometimes it drains way too fast, especially if you're going into strength and two-handed weapons, which is alright, okay, you do more damage with a swing. It's gonna be slower, more stamina. I still felt like sometimes the stamina systems within these games can be sort of hit and miss, and sometimes they can be really annoying. Now, stamina in this game, if you basically exhaust all of your stamina, like Tristan is going to attack very slowly, he's going to do less damage, so your character is not gonna stop attacking, but still, I sort of like, when it comes to stamina within these games, if they're not utilized correctly, they just can become a burden. You see, by default, out of combat, character walks. Yes, you're walking. By holding shift, you run. It doesn't take your stamina, and by double tapping, Tristan starts sprinting, that's where stamina goes down. I am not sure how I feel as walking by default. Again, I understand, taking it slowly, immersion and so on, but you know, just putting it on running by default should be okay. I mean, if people want to walk, they will walk, and majority of people who get invested into these sort of games and immersed are going to walk. But when I constantly have to shift because it's not on by default and I have to like constantly like hold and press and whatever do with the shift, it's just a mechanically exhausting thing to do. Camera can also be a bit problematic, not in the way that it bothered me too much, but the whole spinning and turning around the character made me feel dizzy. I actually had to install a mod where it centers the camera and it became much better and enjoyable to play, because I was getting nauseous, and that doesn't happen all the time within video games. Actually, it's a very rare occurrence. So overall, combat was fine. I got used to it later on, especially once you start unlocking more abilities and stuff which you can do. As far as bugs and glitches are concerned, yeah, there was a lot. I mean, some quests were completely broken to the point where I couldn't finish them, and some, depending on how I finished them, didn't progress. It wasn't often, but sometimes it was actually hindering my progress, and I had to, like, this is crazy, I had to get a mod loader, which is going to give me a console because I had to spawn the quest item in. If I couldn't do that, or well, if I didn't download the mod, there was nothing I can do, and I couldn't progress, and you wouldn't have this review. That's my major issue with this game. It really depends on luck, and the whole game itself can be a bit weird with these bugs, especially when it comes to repeating itself multiple times. And I saw a majority of people on, like, you know, different social media, because I was checking like if other people have this issue as well, then they had it and it was sort of problematic. Now, the game is receiving updates, a lot of them, even like a couple of days ago there was a new one, so the team is working on it, and I feel like this really needs to be tackled properly, because if these bugs and these glitches are sort of, you know, down to a minimum and they're not hindering your progress anymore, which can definitely happen in these sort of open world games because, well, you know, bug testing them is very, very difficult. If these things are properly fixed, and they have been fixing them, it's going to be a lot easier for me to recommend this. Look, details wise, there is a lot here. Even when you sprint, you can slip and fall, you know, you catch a branch and you fall face first. I like that. If you think it's annoying, and yeah, it can be, after a while you get a perk which makes it so you can run over everything without issues. Glad this was implemented, otherwise due to the length of animation when the character falls would be a huge problem, but it's still sort of nice that they think about all of these things and they want to make it as immersive as possible with like the terrain and environment that it, you know, reacts to the player. Same for NPCs. As you wear better armor, they will comment on it, respect you more. If you arrive in rags, they will mention it, they will say like, who are you, bro? There is a lot of passion behind this game. I can see it. You will notice that the budget again wasn't, you know, huge, as the faces of NPCs, for example, are not really the best. Honestly, they were sort of like bad. They don't really stand out with characters a lot in that sense, which I think is needed for RPG of this size, where you have to keep track of all of those characters for later, and a lot of them were very similar to each other, so I was like, okay, I have to go to this guy, the game doesn't tell me, I remember him somewhere, but they all look the same. PC performance was okay. This is, I believe, Unreal Engine 4, so it avoids some of the issues of UE5. The city itself, problematic. That's where I was getting most of these hitches, and it does seem that it's constantly trying to load something because the city itself is gonna be divided by a short loading screen, so even then the city was sort of giving me issues where it's constantly trying to load, and the stuttering was really like noticeable. I mean, Of Ash and Steel is an ambitious try at recreating old school RPGs, and while they did a lot of good here in my opinion, which I enjoyed, and I think they did the task well, I feel like glitches and just general bugs with the game make it so it's tough for me to recommend it right now. It's $29.99, so not a full price, which I definitely do appreciate. I mean, if this was 60 euros, it would be very difficult to recommend this, but a lot of that depends if you like these sort of games that don't guide your hand, and even if you can tolerate bugs and glitches. But it's complicated to say, you know, because my experience with the game might not be the experience which you get, and you might get a major bug which can be, you know, a problem for you. Maybe somewhere where I got a bug, you're not going to get a bug, so these things are very subjective in that sense. Also, some quests can be a bit confusing on where you actually, you know, need to go and what you need to do. I can understand that it wants you to pay attention, but sometimes I really felt like description to reach a place or talk to someone has been too vague. Not all the time, but some quests need better explanation. They really need to be thought to properly, because, you know, when you get a person into this game and maybe they're not familiar with these sort of titles, maybe you're gonna be getting someone who didn't play Gothic, who didn't play like old school RPGs where you actually have to think. Well, you have to have good pointers for them, so later on if they say like, oh, I just cannot find this place, well, someone is going to say, look, the description told you this is where you should look, and this is where you have a clear like waypoint where to go. Sometimes this game just doesn't do that at all. So my recommendation for this, that if you enjoy Gothic and Risen, and in general that Piranha Bytes formula, you will probably enjoy this, but I mean, wait for more updates and maybe a sale. If you can nab this for like $10-15, I think this might be worth your time. And also, it's going to be better to recommend once these, again, glitches and bugs are properly sorted out, because right now I cannot recommend it. Look, there is something here, I can see it. I don't want this video to be like, oh, he hates the game. No, I don't hate the game. After I got the hang of the stuff, I will say again, I had fun with this title. I like these sort of games. It is enjoyable and immersive RPG, even more than some AAA ones for sure. But keep in mind, I love these sort of games, and there was enough passion for me to keep playing this. If this was just another generic RPG, I wouldn't even cover it. But I like when developers try and really put sweat into it. I mean, with some patches and updates and probably time, I say again, get it on sale if you like these sort of games. Big thanks to the developers and publisher for sending over the copy. I hope they continue with this, I really do. Would be a shame if ideas they have, like for this game, go away with just this one. Honestly, we need more games like these, you know, that experiment and try, maybe even overdo sometimes. So this is my review of Ash and Steel, one of the more interesting titles I played in 2025, and well, now at the start of 2026. I will revisit it again after a few months to see the progress as well, and maybe do an updated video depending on what they do with the game and how it goes. So tell me down below, what do you think about all of this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more. Join our community on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye bye.